The cursor blinked, a tiny rhythmic heartbeat of malice. Liam Davenport read the email one last time, a cruel smile playing on his lips. To Maya.Sterling Community Art Center. Org. Subject, an invitation. He pictured her in that dusty, underfunded art studio she called a career, her hands smudged with charcoal, her clothes smelling of turpentine. He imagined her opening this, seeing the gilded logo of the Davenport Innovations annual gala and feeling that familiar, bitter sting of what she'd lost. This wasn't just an invitation. It was a final, glittering testament to his victory in their divorce. He was sending her a front-row ticket to his new life, and he couldn't wait to see the look on her face. Liam Davenport's office was a testament to conquest. Perched on the 55th floor, it offered a panoramic view of San Francisco, a city he felt he was slowly conquering, one tech deal at a time. The glass walls, brushed steel accents and minimalist furniture all screamed one thing: power. Power he had earned, clawed for, and sacrificed for. His marriage to Maya Sterling felt like a part of that sacrifice now, a necessary shedding of dead weight. He remembered her as soft, quiet, and utterly unambitious. She had been content with their small apartment, her part-time work at a local gallery, and her gentle hobbies. While he was dreaming of IPOs and market disruption, she was trying to perfect a watercolor wash. He'd loved her once, or so he told himself, but love couldn't build an empire. Ambition could. "Sir, Ms. Thorne is on line 2, his assistant Kendra chirped through the intercom. Liam slicked back a stray strand of his dark hair and tapped the speaker button. "Bianca, darling." "Liam, did you send it?" Bianca Thorne's voice was smooth and sharp, like a shard of expensive crystal. "The invitation just dispatched," he said, leaning back in his leather throne of a chair. He swiveled to face the window, the city lights beginning to sparkle like a carpet of diamonds below. Subject line, an invitation. Simple, elegant, almost benevolent. Bianca laughed, a sound that was more performative than joyful. "Benevolent. You're a monster, Liam. I love it. Do you think she'll actually come?" "Of course she will," Liam said with unwavering confidence. "Curiosity and a misplaced sense of pride will get the better of her. She'll want to see me, to see if she can handle it. She'll rent some drab little dress, show up looking completely out of place, and I'll be the perfect gentleman. I'll introduce her to you. I'll show her this life, this world she was never cut out for. It's the kindest way to give her closure, really, to show her I was right all along." "The kindness is overwhelming," Bianca purred. "Just make sure she doesn't make a scene. The last thing we need is some weepy ex-wife causing a stir in front of the board members." "Maya doesn't make scenes," Liam scoffed, the memory of her quiet tears during their divorce proceedings flashing through his mind. That had been her way, silent disappointment. It had been infuriating. She internalizes. She'll stand in a corner, nurse a single glass of cheap sparkling wine, and then slip out before dessert. It will be a pathetic little pilgrimage to the life she could have had. The truth was, Liam needed her to come. His success, as massive as it was, felt incomplete without her as a witness. She was the ghost at his feast, the living embodiment of his past. He had told her during one of their final, brutal arguments that her lack of drive was an anchor dragging him to the bottom. "You're happy in the shallow end, Maya," he'd sneered. "I'm swimming for the horizon." He needed her to see his horizon, to see it glittering and vast, and to know she was forever stranded on the shore. He had built Davenport Innovations from a garage startup into a multi-billion-dollar behemoth. The annual gala was his crowning achievement, a lavish affair celebrating the company's success and its philanthropic endeavors. This year, the gala was particularly important. They were honoring a key investor, a silent partner from a mysterious firm called Sterling Holdings, whose massive last-minute capital injection had saved their flagship AI project from a hostile takeover attempt a year prior. No one had ever met the head of Sterling Holdings. They were notoriously private, communicating only through their stern, efficient vice president, a man named Marcus Cole. Securing their continued partnership was paramount. Liam ended the call with Bianca, promising to pick her up in the new Rolls-Royce he'd acquired. He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked down at the sprawling city, a kingdom of light and steel. He had everything he'd ever wanted. A beautiful, socially brilliant fiancée. A company that was the envy of Silicon Valley, wealth beyond measure. So why did the thought of Maya Sterling, with her paint-stained fingers and quiet, unassuming life, still occupy a space in his mind? It wasn't love. It was something more primal. It was the need to have his choices validated, to prove that leaving her wasn't just a strategic move, but the only move. Her presence at his gala, small and insignificant amidst his grandeur, would be the final signature on the contract of his success. He'd be gracious, magnanimous even. He would be Liam Davenport, the victor, and she would be Maya Sterling, the footnote. The email arrived without fanfare, slipping into an inbox mostly filled with grant proposals, artist submissions, and newsletters from local museums. Maya Sterling was cleaning brushes in a deep utility sink, the smell of mineral spirits clinging to the air, when her phone buzzed on the cluttered wooden workbench beside her. Wiping her hands on a rag, she picked it up. The sender's name, Liam Davenport, was a punch to the gut. She hadn't seen his name in her inbox in 2 years, not since the last sterile communication from his lawyers. Her thumb hovered over the screen, a tremor running through it. A part of her wanted to delete it, to throw the phone against the brick wall and watch it shatter, just like he had shattered her. But curiosity, that treacherous human impulse, won. She tapped it open. The Davenport Innovations Annual Gala. The logo was embossed in digital gold, shimmering even on the small screen. The details were opulent, the venue historic, the purpose self-congratulatory. It was so quintessentially Liam. She read his brief, impersonal message. Maya, thought you might be interested in attending. It's for a good cause. Best, Liam. A good cause, she whispered to the empty studio. The only cause Liam ever served was his own. She sank onto a wobbly stool, the phone feeling heavy in her hand. The invitation wasn't a peace offering. Liam didn't do olive branches. He wielded swords. This was a summons, a challenge. Come see what you're missing. Come see how right I was to leave you behind. The arrogance was so palpable, it was almost a physical force pushing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her life now was a world away from the one she'd shared with him. The Community Arts Center was her sanctuary. It was perpetually underfunded and chaotic, but it was real. Here she taught troubled teens how to express their anger through sculpture, and seniors how to reclaim their memories with portrait painting. Her hands were stained, her nails were short, and her heart, while scarred, was full. It was a small life, a quiet life. The exact kind of life Liam had despised. The pain of their separation was a dull, chronic ache. He hadn't just left her. He had systematically dismantled her self-worth. He'd called her passion a hobby, her sensitivity a weakness. He'd made her feel that her quiet contentment was a character flaw, a failure of imagination. By the end, she had almost believed him. Her phone rang, startling her. The caller ID read Marcus Cole. She took a deep, steadying breath before answering. Maya. Marcus's voice was a warm, steady baritone. He had been her father's right-hand man, and now he was hers. He was the only other person who knew the full truth. The quarterly reports are ready for your review, but you sound distracted. Is everything all right? I just got an invitation, Maya said, her voice tight, from Liam to his company's gala. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Marcus was a man of few words, but his silences were deeply expressive. This one was filled with protective anger. What does that man want now? To gloat, I assume, she said, forcing a light, dismissive tone she didn't feel. He wants to parade his success and his new fiancée in front of me. He wants to see me shrink." "And will you?" Marcus asked gently. That was the question, wasn't it? For 2 years, she had been rebuilding. After her father, the reclusive and brilliant investor Robert Sterling, had passed away a few months after her divorce, Maya had been left with an inheritance that staggered her. Sterling Holdings, an empire built in the shadows. Suddenly the woman Liam had called unambitious was the chairwoman of a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. She had been terrified. But Marcus had been there, guiding her, teaching her, showing her that the same intuition she used to mix colors on a canvas could be applied to reading a balance sheet. She had a good mind, a sharp eye for detail, and a deep sense of integrity her father had passed down. She learned to lead not with bombast and ego, like Liam, but with quiet questions and careful consideration. She ran her empire from the background, using her father's name and Marcus as her public face. No one knew the quiet art teacher was one of the most powerful silent investors in the country, least of all Liam Davenport. The irony was almost too perfect. His savior investor, the mysterious Sterling Holdings that had rescued his project, was her. She had approved the investment on Marcus's recommendation because it was a sound financial decision. And perhaps a small, uncharitable part of her had enjoyed the thought of owning a piece of his success without him ever knowing. "I don't know if I'll go," she admitted to Marcus. "Why walk into the lion's den?" "Sometimes," Marcus said, his voice firm, "you have to walk into the den to remind the lion that you're not prey. You are the chairwoman of Sterling Holdings, Maya. You are in a position to acquire his entire company with the stroke of a pen. He has no power over you." He was right, logically, but the wounds were emotional, not logical. The power imbalance had been the defining feature of their marriage. Now the tables had turned so dramatically it was almost absurd. He thought he was on top of the world, looking down at her. In reality, she was the mountain he was standing on. She ended the call and looked around her studio. The canvases, the clay, the half-finished projects. This was her truth. This was who she was. But who she was also included the woman who signed off on 9-figure deals. She wasn't just Maya Sterling, the gentle art teacher. She was also Ms. Sterling, the owner. Maybe it was time she integrated the two. A slow, cold resolve began to crystallize in her heart. She wouldn't go for revenge. Revenge was Liam's game. She would go for herself. She would walk into his glittering world, not as the ghost of the wife he'd discarded, but as the woman she had become. She would not cause a scene. She would not cry. She would simply be. And she would let him see that the person he had tried so hard to break had instead been forged. She picked up her phone and RSVP'd. One guest, Maya Sterling. The Meridian Grand Ballroom was bathed in a sea of sapphire and gold light. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen waterfalls, their light refracting across the hundreds of guests mingling below. The air hummed with the electric buzz of money, power, and influence. This was Liam's element, his natural habitat. He stood near the grand entrance, a flute of vintage champagne in one hand, his other arm possessively around Bianca's waist. She was breathtaking in a crimson gown that seemed poured onto her frame, a stark, dramatic contrast to the cool tones of the ballroom. She was a perfect accessory, laughing at the right jokes, her eyes scanning the crowd with the practiced gaze of a social predator. "Darling, you've outdone yourself," she murmured, kissing his cheek. "Everyone who's anyone is here." "Of course," Liam said, his smile feeling tight, rehearsed. Success attracts success. But his eyes kept flicking towards the entrance. He was a hunter, waiting for his quarry. He'd been rehearsing this moment for days. He would be calm, sophisticated, a touch magnanimous. He'd spot her from across the room, looking lost and intimidated. He would graciously approach, Bianca on his arm. The introductions would be a masterclass in controlled condescension. "Maya, you remember I told you about Bianca. Bianca, this is Maya, my first wife." The emphasis on first would be subtle, but devastating. "You're distracted," Bianca noted, her perfectly manicured nails tapping his arm. "Still waiting for the ghost of marriage past?" "Just ensuring all my guests feel welcome," he lied smoothly. A pang of something unfamiliar and unwelcome pricked at him. Nerves. Why would he be nervous? This was his night, his triumph. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, the anticipation began to curdle into a strange anxiety. What if she didn't come? The thought was surprisingly deflating. The entire performance he'd constructed in his mind would be for an audience of one, and if she wasn't here, the victory would feel hollow. He scanned the crowd, greeting a tech CEO here, a city councilman there. He talked about market projections and third-quarter earnings, the familiar language of his world a comforting balm. He was Liam Davenport. People deferred to him. They wanted his time, his insight, his capital. He was a king in his court. Then he saw her. She wasn't where he expected her to be, cowering near the catering table or hovering awkwardly by a pillar. She was standing near the French doors that led to the terrace, engaged in a quiet but animated conversation with Marcus Cole. Liam's mind stuttered for a second. Marcus Cole, the notoriously gruff and unapproachable VP of Sterling Holdings. What was he doing talking to Maya? They must have just met. Cole was probably being polite to a lone woman before moving on to more important people. But it was Maya's appearance that truly threw him. He had expected less. The woman he remembered would have worn something safe, something beige or grey. The woman standing by the terrace was wearing a simple, impeccably tailored gown of deep emerald green. It wasn't flashy or revealing, but it hugged her form with an understated confidence he'd never seen in her. Her hair, which she used to wear in a simple, careless ponytail, was styled in soft waves that framed a face that was calmer, more defined than he remembered. She wore minimal jewelry, but her eyes, as she listened to Cole, were bright and focused. She wasn't intimidated. She looked poised. Bianca followed his gaze. "Is that her?" she asked, a note of derision in her voice. "The dress is rather plain, isn't it?" "Yes, that's her," Liam said, his voice a low growl. The plan was already derailing. She wasn't supposed to look like this. She wasn't supposed to be comfortably chatting with one of the most important men in the room. He felt a surge of possessive anger. He needed to reassert control of the narrative. He excused himself and Bianca from their conversation and began to move through the crowd, his path a direct line to Maya. It was time for the show to begin. As he approached, he saw Marcus Cole nod respectfully to Maya and then discreetly step away, melting back into the crowd. Strange. Cole wasn't known for his social graces. Maya turned as if sensing his approach. Her gaze met his across the last few feet separating them. There was no fear in her eyes, no awe. Just a calm, unreadable neutrality that was more unsettling than any emotional outburst would have been. "Liam," she said, her voice even and cool. It was the same voice, but the timid undertones he remembered were gone. "Maya, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, forcing his practiced smile. He slid his arm around Bianca, pulling her forward. "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Bianca Thorne. Bianca, this is Maya Sterling." Bianca extended a hand, her diamond engagement ring catching the light like a weapon. "It's so lovely to finally meet you," she said, her tone dripping with insincere sweetness. "Liam has told me so little about you." The insult was perfectly delivered. Maya simply took her hand, her grip firm and brief. "It's a pleasure to meet you too, Bianca. The ring is beautiful." Her compliment was delivered with such genuine placidity that it completely disarmed the intended slight. She wasn't playing the game. Liam felt his frustration mounting. This wasn't going as planned. He needed to land a blow. "It's quite a step up from the community center, isn't it?" he said, gesturing vaguely at the opulent ballroom. "I hope you're not too overwhelmed." There it was, the jab, the reminder of her small life and his grand one. He watched her face, waiting for the flicker of hurt, the shadow of inadequacy. Maya looked around the room. a small, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. Then she looked back at him, her eyes holding his. "No, not at all," she said, her voice as calm as a deep lake. "It's a lovely event, Liam. You've done very well for yourself." It was a simple statement, but it felt like a judgment. She wasn't looking at him as an ex-wife full of regret. She was looking at him like an observer, detached and unimpressed. The power dynamic he had so carefully constructed was crumbling before he even had a chance to enjoy it. He felt a desperate, clawing need to put her back in her place, the place he had assigned her in the story of his life. But he was starting to fear she had already rewritten the entire book. Maya had walked through the grand doors of the Meridian ballroom, feeling not like a lamb entering a lion's den, but like a queen returning to a court she had long ago abdicated. The opulence didn't intimidate her. It felt familiar. Sterling Holdings owned the building. It was a small detail she had discovered during a portfolio review with Marcus, a fact that had given her a quiet, secret smile. Liam was hosting his victory party in her house. From the moment she stepped inside, she felt the shift. She had spent years of her life trying to make herself smaller, to fit into Liam's world, to not take up too much space, to not have needs that might inconvenience his ambition. Tonight, she simply occupied her space. She wore the emerald gown, not for him, but for herself. Green was the color of new growth. She had spotted Marcus near the terrace exactly as they had planned. His presence was a quiet anchor in the swirling sea of faces. "He's watching you," Marcus had said in a low voice, his back to the room as they pretended to admire the city skyline. "He's with a woman in a red dress. He's on his way over." "Let him come," Maya replied, her heart beating a steady, resolute rhythm. "This is the last ghost I need to exorcise, Marcus." "Just remember who you are, Maya," he said, giving her a look of paternal pride. "Not who he thinks you are." He gave a slight bow of his head and moved away just as Liam began his approach. Facing Liam now, with Bianca clinging to his arm like a designer parasite, Maya felt a strange sense of detachment. He looked the same. Impeccably tailored suit, expensive watch, the same arrogant tilt to his jaw. But she was seeing him through new eyes. The power and charisma she had once found so intoxicating now looked like a fragile, desperate performance. He wasn't a titan. He was a man terrified of being seen as small. His condescending remark about the community center should have stung. The old Maya would have flinched, her cheeks burning with shame. But the new Maya simply absorbed it, recognized it for what it was, a clumsy, pathetic attempt to regain the upper hand, and let it go. Her calm response, "It's a lovely event, Liam. You've done very well for yourself," had the desired effect. Confusion flickered in his eyes. He had expected her to be a mirror, reflecting his greatness back at him. Instead, she was a window, looking right through him. Bianca, sensing Liam's faltering control, stepped in. "Maya, what is it you do exactly?" Liam mentioned something about art. It sounds so charmingly quaint. Maya met the other woman's gaze. There was a hard, competitive gleam in Bianca's eyes. She was a woman who knew her value was tied to the man on her arm, and she saw Maya as a potential threat to her investment. "I run a non-profit arts center downtown," Maya said simply. "We provide arts education and therapy for underserved communities. It's very rewarding." She offered no further details, no defensiveness. She stated it as a fact, as concrete and valuable as any of Liam's business ventures. Liam let out a short, dismissive laugh. "See? Always saving the world, my Maya. I, on the other hand, am content with just owning it." The possessive pronoun, my Maya, hung in the air between them, a relic of a past he was trying to weaponize. Before she could respond, the lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, and a pleasant chime echoed through the sound system. A man was stepping up to the podium on the main stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please," the MC announced. Liam straightened his tie, a smirk returning to his face. Showtime, he whispered to Bianca. He gave Maya a final, dismissive glance. Enjoy the party, Maya. Try the canapes. They're certainly better than what you're used to. With that, he steered Bianca towards the front of the room, leaving Maya standing alone. But she wasn't alone. From across the room, she caught Marcus's eye. He gave her a subtle, encouraging nod. It was time. The MC began his speech, lavishing praise on Liam and Davenport innovations. He spoke of innovation, of vision, of market leadership. Maya listened, feeling no bitterness, only a profound sense of pity for the man who needed this much external validation to feel whole. Then the MC shifted his tone. But tonight we are also here to honor a partnership that has been instrumental to our success. A year ago, as many of you know, Davenport Innovations faced a significant challenge. A project critical to our future was at risk. It was then that a silent partner stepped in, demonstrating not only immense faith in our vision, but also the decisive power to secure it. A murmur went through the crowd. This was the part of the evening everyone was curious about. The mystery of Sterling Holdings. Liam looked smug, standing near the stage. This was his story of salvation, another chapter in the legend of Liam Davenport, the man who could attract the support of even the most elusive players. This partner has, until now, remained completely behind the scenes, the MC continued, his voice building with dramatic flair. They are known for their shrewd investments, their quiet influence, and their unwavering commitment to integrity. We are immensely grateful for the support of Sterling Holdings. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. Liam clapped politely, a gracious king acknowledging his benefactors. Tonight, the MC boomed. For the first time, the leader of Sterling Holdings has agreed to step out of the shadows to accept our deepest gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to introduce to you the visionary chairwoman of Sterling Holdings, Ms. Maya Sterling. For a moment, there was silence. The name registered, but the context was impossible. It was a glitch in the matrix, a software bug in the grand program of the evening. Liam's polite applause faltered, his hands freezing mid-clap. His smile froze, then cracked, like porcelain dropped on a marble floor. Maya Sterling. He turned his head, a slow, creaking motion, as if his neck were made of rust. He searched the spot where he had left her, expecting, what? To see her looking as confused as he was, to see her laughing at some bizarre, cruel joke. But she was no longer there. Instead, she was walking towards the stage. A spotlight found her, bathing her emerald dress in a celestial glow. Every eye in the room was on her. She moved with a quiet, unhurried grace that was utterly captivating. The woman he had mocked for being overwhelmed by the room now owned it completely. The murmurs in the crowd grew into a wave of shocked whispers. People were turning, pointing, their minds racing to connect the dots between the mousy ex-wife he'd occasionally mentioned and the powerful, enigmatic figure on the stage. Liam's world tilted on its axis. The floor seemed to drop out from under him, leaving him in a dizzying free-fall. His brain frantically tried to process the information, but it was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Sterling Holdings, his savior, the silent, powerful investor. Her father's name was Sterling, Robert Sterling, the reclusive, eccentric investor who had died a couple of years ago. He had left everything to his daughter. The pieces didn't just click into place, they slammed together with the force of a tectonic collision, shattering his reality. He saw Marcus Cole standing near the side of the stage, his expression unreadable but for a hint of grim satisfaction in his eyes. Cole wasn't talking to her before. He was conferring with his boss. "Liam, what's happening?" Bianca's voice was a sharp, panicked hiss in his ear. Her grip on his arm was suddenly painful. "Is this a joke?" Liam couldn't answer. His throat was constricted, his breath caught in his lungs. He could only watch as Maya ascended the small set of stairs to the stage and shook the MC's hand. She stepped to the podium, adjusting the microphone with a calm familiarity that suggested this was not her first time addressing a crowd. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, amplified throughout the silent ballroom. There was no trace of the hesitant woman he had known. "Thank you," she began, her eyes sweeping across the audience. They did not land on him. It was as if he wasn't even there. Davenport Innovations is a company with a remarkable vision, and Sterling Holdings is proud to be a part of its journey. My father, Robert Sterling, taught me that the best investments are not in technologies or markets, but in people. We saw in this company a drive for innovation that we believed was worth protecting. Her words were professional, gracious, and utterly impersonal, and every single one was a nail being hammered into his coffin. She was praising his company, the company she now partially owned, the company she had saved. He hadn't attracted her investment. He had been the beneficiary of her calculated business decision. The power dynamic he had cherished, the one that defined his entire sense of self, had been a lie. He wasn't the king. He was a court jester, and he hadn't even known he was wearing the bells. He felt hundreds of pairs of eyes on him. He could feel their pity, their morbid curiosity. He was the punchline, the great Liam Davenport, humiliated on his own stage by the quiet, unassuming wife he had thrown away. Bianca had taken a half step away from him, her face a mask of horror and social ruin. She wasn't looking at a powerful fiancé anymore. She was looking at a fool. Maya kept her speech short and elegant. She spoke of the future, of shared goals, of philanthropic commitments. She never once stumbled. She never once glanced in his direction. Her complete and total indifference was more devastating than any screaming match or tearful accusation could ever have been. He had invited her here to be a footnote in his story, and she had just revealed that he was a minor character in hers. As she finished her remarks to a crescendo of thunderous applause, she finally let her eyes drift over the crowd and find his. There was no malice in her gaze, no triumph. There was only a quiet, sad finality. It was a look that said, "It's over," not their marriage. That had been over for years, but his hold on her. The ghost he had tried to summon had exorcised him instead. The applause washed over him, a sound that felt like roaring laughter. He had wanted to humiliate her, to show her how small her world was. Instead, standing in his gilded ballroom, surrounded by the trappings of his success, Liam Davenport had never felt so small in his entire life. The regret was a physical thing, a cold, heavy stone lodging itself in the center of his chest, and he knew, with sickening certainty, that it was a weight he would carry for the rest of his days. As the applause subsided, Maya felt a profound sense of quiet. The storm had passed. For years she had carried the weight of Liam's judgment, the quiet shame of feeling like she wasn't enough. On that stage, under the glare of the spotlight, she hadn't been playing a role. She had simply been herself, all of herself. And in doing so, the weight had vanished. She descended the stairs, and the atmosphere in the room had changed entirely. The sea of people parted for her. Faces that had been indifferent before were now alight with curiosity, respect, and avarice. A tech billionaire who had barely given her a nod earlier was now rushing to her side, hand extended. "Ms. Sterling, a remarkable speech. I had no idea. I knew your father's reputation, of course. A legend. We must talk." "Ms. Sterling, Catherine Pierce from the Financial Chronicle. Could we get a moment of your time?" "An absolute honor, Ms. Sterling." She was no longer Maya, the ex-wife. She was Ms. Sterling, the power player. Marcus appeared at her elbow, a silent, formidable bodyguard, expertly managing the sudden influx of attention. He would murmur, "Ms. Sterling has another engagement shortly," or, "Perhaps you can schedule a call with my office," steering her through the throng. Her eyes scanned the room for Liam. She saw him standing frozen near the stage, a statue of a man. Bianca was no longer on his arm. She was several feet away, talking animatedly with a rival CEO, her expression a careful calculation of damage control. She was already distancing herself, jumping from the sinking ship. A part of Maya, a small, wounded part, had wanted this moment to be a victory. She had wanted to feel triumphant, to savor his shock and humiliation. But looking at his ashen face, the utter desolation in his eyes, she felt no joy. She only felt a deep, hollowing sadness. This wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy. A story of a man so blinded by his own ambition that he had discarded the one thing of value he might have actually had, not because of what she was now, but because of the person she had always been, loyal, supportive, and kind. He had mistaken quietness for weakness, and in doing so, had revealed his own. She had no desire to speak to him, to twist the knife. The unveiling wasn't for him, not really. It was for her. It was the final, definitive act of reclaiming her own narrative. "Marcus, I'd like to leave," she said quietly. "Of course," he replied. "The car is waiting at the south entrance." They began to move towards the exit, their progress slow as people continued to try and intercept her. As they passed the grand bar, she heard a snippet of conversation that made her pause. "Can you believe it? He invited his ex-wife to humiliate her and she owned the whole damn building and his company. It's like something out of a movie," a woman said, laughing. The gossip was already spreading, cementing into the legend of the night. Liam's public downfall. Maya felt a pang of something that was almost guilt, but she pushed it away. He had built this stage himself. He had written the play and cast the actors. He could not be angry at her for simply delivering her lines. As they reached the lobby, a voice called out her name. "Maya!" She turned. It was Liam. He had followed her, his face pale and drawn. The confident arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate vulnerability she had never seen in him, not even at his lowest moments. He stopped a few feet away, seemingly unsure of what to do or say. The lobby was quieter here, but people were still watching. He started, his voice hoarse. "I had no idea." "I know," she said softly. There was nothing else to say. "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you ever tell me? About your father? About any of it?" Maya looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to be truly honest, not with anger, but with a simple, profound truth. "Because you never asked," she said. "You were so busy telling me who I was, what I lacked, that you never once stopped to see who I actually might be. You didn't want a partner, Liam. You wanted an audience, and I wasn't a very good one." His face crumpled. The truth of her words hit him with visible force. He had talked and talked for years about his dreams, his plans, his successes. He had never once asked about hers. He assumed she didn't have any. "Maya, I'm sorry," he whispered, the words sounding foreign and clumsy on his tongue. It was the apology she had craved for years. But hearing it now, it felt like a coin dropped into a well that had long since run dry. It made a small, hollow sound and disappeared. "I know you are, Liam," she said, and her voice was gentle, full of a pity that was somehow more devastating than scorn. "Goodbye." She turned and walked away, Marcus holding the large glass door open for her. She didn't look back. Stepping out into the cool San Francisco night, she took a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. It felt like the first breath she had taken in a very long time. The Gala, Liam, their shared past. It was all behind her now, a chapter closed, a ghost finally laid to rest. She was no longer defined by his story. She was finally and completely the author of her own. The ride back to her quiet Pacific Heights home was silent. Marcus drove the black sedan with his usual stoic efficiency, navigating the sleeping streets of the city. The adrenaline from the evening was beginning to fade, leaving behind a strange and unexpected emptiness. Maya stared out the window, watching the lights blur past, her reflection a ghostly image against the glass. She should have felt ecstatic, vindicated, triumphant. She had faced her demon and emerged not just unscathed, but victorious. The entire tech world was buzzing with her name. She had brought Liam Davenport, the man who had shattered her confidence to his knees without raising her voice. So why did she feel so hollow? The applause still echoed in her ears, but it sounded distant, as if it were for someone else. In the ballroom she had become Ms. Sterling, a symbol of hidden power and dramatic revelation. But in the quiet of the car she was just Maya, and Maya felt tired. "You were magnificent tonight," Marcus said, his voice breaking the silence. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes kind. "Your father would have been incredibly proud." "He would have hated the spectacle," Maya said with a small, sad smile. "He never understood why people needed to be so loud about their success." "He wouldn't have liked the publicity, no," Marcus conceded. "But he would have been proud of the strength you showed. You stood in your truth, Maya. That is all he ever wanted for you." Her truth. For so long her truth had been tangled up with Liam's. His validation had been the sun she orbited, and when he had extinguished it, she had been left in the cold and dark. The past 2 years had been about learning to be her own source of light. Tonight was supposed to be the culmination of that journey, the moment she finally blazed. But it felt more like an ending than a beginning. She realized the hollowness came from the simple, painful fact that the victory didn't erase the scars. Proving Liam wrong didn't undo the years he'd spent making her feel small. His apology, as desperate as it was, couldn't stitch back together the pieces of herself she'd lost in that marriage. Redemption was a process, not a single dramatic event. When they arrived at her home, a beautiful but unassuming brownstone, Marcus walked her to the door. "Will you be all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "I will be," she said, and she meant it. The hollowness wasn't despair, it was just space, a space that had once been filled with pain and was now empty, waiting for something new to grow. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything, not just for tonight." "It is my honor, Maya," he said with a slight bow. Inside, she shed the emerald dress, letting it pool on the floor like a discarded skin. She washed the makeup from her face and pulled on a simple, soft t-shirt and pajama pants. She padded into her art studio at the back of the house, the one place she felt completely herself. The room smelled of clay and linseed oil. A half-finished canvas sat on an easel, a landscape of the rugged California coast, all turbulent seas and resilient cliffs. She picked up a brush, her fingers curling around the familiar wood. She didn't paint. She just stood there, holding it, feeling its weight in her hand. Her phone buzzed incessantly on a nearby table. She knew it would be a flood of messages, from journalists, from business associates, from people who hadn't spoken to her in years. She ignored it. Instead, she thought of Liam's face in the lobby, the utter devastation. She had taken away his narrative, the story he told himself about his life, his success, his choices. He had built his entire identity on the idea that leaving her was a necessary step towards greatness. She had shown him and the world that he had left greatness behind. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate was a fire that required too much fuel. What she felt now was a profound, aching pity. Pity for a man so insecure he had to build a glass castle around himself, and who was now forced to live among the shards. Her victory wasn't in his defeat. Her victory was in this room. It was in the quiet joy she found in creation, in the meaningful work she did at the center, in the loyalty of a man like Marcus, in the legacy her father had entrusted to her. Her victory was the quiet, unassuming life Liam had so thoroughly scorned. It turned out that life hadn't been small at all. It had just been waiting for her to grow into it. She put the brush down and walked to the window, looking out at her small, tranquil garden. The moon was high and bright. The applause was gone. The whispers were gone. There was only the quiet hum of the city and the gentle rustle of leaves. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. The drive home for Liam was a blur of streetlights and shame. Bianca had made a flimsy excuse about getting a ride with friends and had all but fled from him, her final look a mixture of contempt and pity. He didn't blame her. He was a social leper, a cautionary tale that would be whispered over cocktails and board meetings for months to come. He stalked into his cavernous, sterile penthouse, the silence of it pressing in on him. He ripped off his bow tie, his hands shaking with a rage that had no target but himself. He went to the bar and poured a tumbler of whiskey, drinking it down in one searing gulp. The burn did nothing to numb the cold, hollowing certainty of his own stupidity. You were so busy telling me who I was. You never once stopped to see who I actually might be. Maya's words echoed in the vast, empty space of his apartment, in the vast, empty space of his soul. He had been a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. He began to pace, a caged animal in a prison of his own design. Every object in the room, the expensive art, the designer furniture, the sweeping city views, seemed to mock him. They were trophies from a game he now realized he had lost spectacularly. He had spent years accumulating things, accolades, and power, all to prove that he was a success. And in one night, Maya had shown him that he possessed nothing of real value. His mind, a weapon he had always trusted, turned on him. It replayed their marriage not as he had edited it, a story of his ambition being held back by her simplicity, but with a brutal, horrifying clarity. He saw Maya, her brow furrowed in concentration, as she meticulously went over their finances in the early days, finding ways to save so he could invest in his fledgling company. He had called her frugal. He saw her staying up all night with him before a big presentation, making coffee, listening to him rehearse, offering quiet words of encouragement. He had taken it for granted. He saw the genuine joy on her face when she talked about a new artist she'd discovered, a joy he had systematically belittled because it didn't translate into profit or status. He had called her unambitious. What a joke! She hadn't lacked ambition, she had simply had a different kind. Her ambition was to build, to nurture, to create meaning. His was to conquer and acquire. He had seen her world as small because he was incapable of understanding its depth. The most damning memory surfaced, one he had buried deep. It was their last anniversary together. He had forgotten. He came home late from a celebratory dinner after securing a round of funding, drunk on success and champagne. She was waiting for him. The table was set with their good china. A simple home-cooked meal was cold on the plates. She had a small, wrapped gift for him. She hadn't been angry, just sad. Her disappointment was a quiet, heavy blanket in the room. And what had he done? He had sneered. "You're still focused on this sentimental nonsense, Maya. I just raised $10 million. That's what's real. That's what matters." He had broken her heart that night. He had seen it in her eyes, and he had felt a flicker of cruel satisfaction, believing he was teaching her a valuable lesson about the new world he was entering, a world where she didn't belong. The man who had done that, who had been capable of such casual cruelty, he didn't recognize him. He didn't want to recognize him, but that man was him. He sank onto a sofa, the whiskey tumbler slipping from his fingers and thudding onto the thick rug. He buried his face in his hands, and a dry, racking sob escaped his chest. It wasn't a cry for his lost reputation or his shattered engagement. It was a cry for his own lost soul. It was a cry for the good man he might have been, the man Maya had once loved, a man he had methodically destroyed in his pursuit of a hollow crown. He had invited her to the gala to humiliate her. He had wanted her to see him as a king. But the thing about putting someone on a pedestal is that it gives them a very clear view of your own failings. He hadn't just misjudged her. He had failed a fundamental test of character. He had built an empire, but he had lost himself. The regret was no longer a stone in his chest. It was a vast, dark ocean, and he was drowning in it. There was no escape. There was no deal he could make, no strategy he could employ to fix this. The damage was done. The only thing left to do was to learn how to live with the ghost of the man he had been and the woman he had so carelessly thrown away. His kingdom was nothing but a gilded cage, and he was finally truly alone in it. A week passed. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. The story was the talk of the city, a modern-day fable of hubris and revelation. Liam's phone rang constantly for the first 2 days. Journalists, Schadenfreude-filled colleagues, concerned board members. And then it fell silent. He was a pariah. Bianca had officially ended their engagement via a cold text message from her publicist. Liam didn't care. He moved through his days in a fog of self-recrimination. He went to the office, sat in his glass-walled cage, and stared at spreadsheets that no longer held any meaning. The numbers were just numbers. The thrill of the chase was gone, replaced by the gnawing ache of regret. He knew he had to do something. An apology in a crowded lobby was not enough. Not nearly enough for the years of quiet damage he had inflicted. He needed to explain, to atone, though he knew he had no right to expect forgiveness. He tried calling Maya's cell phone, a number he was surprised he still remembered. It went straight to voicemail every time. He knew she was screening his calls, and he couldn't blame her. So he decided to write. He sat down at his laptop one evening, the city lights glittering outside his window like 1,000 mocking eyes. He opened a new document and typed her name. Maya. He started to write, and the words poured out of him, a torrent of confession and remorse he hadn't known he was holding back. Maya. I don't know where to begin, and I know I have no right to ask for your time or your attention, but I can't live with the words I left unsaid. The apology I gave you at the gala was pathetic and selfish. Another attempt to make myself feel better. The truth is, I don't deserve to feel better. The past week has been a relentless education in my own failings. I've been replaying our marriage, our life together, and I am horrified by the man I was. I see it all now with a clarity that is agonizing. I see your patience, your support, your quiet strength, and I see my own towering arrogance, my insecurity, my relentless, destructive ego. I called you unambitious. How blind I was. You had the ambition to build a life of meaning, to care for people, to create beauty. I only had the ambition to win. I see now that my entire definition of success was a cheap, hollow imitation of the real thing. I was so terrified of being seen as ordinary that I became a monster who took your love, your kindness and your light and tried to snuff it out because it didn't reflect my own image back at me. The night of the gala, I didn't invite you there to give you closure. I invited you there to hurt you. I wanted to stand on the mountain of my success and look down on you, to prove to myself that my choice to leave was the right one. It was the single most despicable act of my life, and the universe, in its perfect brutal irony, showed me that I wasn't standing on a mountain at all. I was standing in a valley, and I had been too blind to see the majestic peak that was you right in front of me the whole time. Learning about Sterling Holdings, about what you've built on your own terms, in your own way. I feel a strange sense of pride in you, which I know is absurd and something I haven't earned. But mostly, I feel a profound and bottomless shame for the man who was given the gift of being your husband and was too stupid to recognize its value. I'm not writing this to ask you to come back. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness because I don't believe I've earned it. I'm writing this because you deserve to know that I see it. I see you. I see who you always were. And I see, finally, who I am. And I am going to change. Not for you, but because of you. You've shown me what real strength is. And I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to build a fraction of it in myself. I am so sorry, Maya, for everything. He finished typing, his chest aching, tears blurring the screen. It was the most honest thing he had ever written. He read it over, his finger hovering over the send button. This raw, pathetic confession. What would it accomplish? It would only be another intrusion into her peaceful new life, another demand for her emotional energy. She had already given him his answer in the lobby. Goodbye. It was a clean break. A gift. Dumping this letter on her would be a selfish act, a final attempt to make his pain her problem. Redemption, he realized, wasn't about grand gestures or beautifully written apologies. It was about quiet, consistent and difficult work. It was about actions, not words. With a deep, shuddering breath, Liam Davenport selected all the text in the document. He thought of Maya in her art studio, her hands covered in clay, creating something real and meaningful. He thought of the man he wanted to become, a man worthy of his own respect. And he hit the delete key. The screen went blank. The letter would remain unsent. His atonement would not be in telling her he would change. It would be in the changing itself. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time, he was looking at the right horizon. The story of Liam and Maya isn't just about a dramatic gala reveal. It's a powerful reminder that our perception of others is often a reflection of ourselves. Liam's arrogance blinded him to Maya's true worth, leading to a public humiliation that forced him to confront the emptiness of his own success. Maya's journey from a quiet, undervalued wife to a confident powerhouse shows us that true strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room, but about knowing your own value, even when no one else does. Their story explores the complex themes of regret, redemption, and the quiet power of self-worth. If this story of betrayal and empowerment resonated with you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a story of poetic justice, and subscribe for more emotional and dramatic tales. Thank you for watching.